We're very proud to have a panel of two very accomplished and knowledgeable scholars on China interact with an audience that is also well versed with the country and its workings. In presence of such minds, it is indeed an honor for me to present the opening remarks at today's event and set the stage for a captivating conversation on China. Today, we are hosting two of India's leading China scholars with expertise on its politics, foreign policy, and strategic outlook. Dr. Panda is an expert on China's grand strategy and foreign policy practices in Asia and beyond. His contributions to the discussion today will give us an idea of the implications of the Party Congress internationally and for India in particular. Dr. Deepak is a sinologist and China scholar with expertise in Chinese history, society, and culture, who is well positioned to decode the social and political dynamics associated with the Party Congress. Both these perspectives put together, with overarching focuses on domestic politics, economics, foreign policy, and party politics, will dovetail neatly this evening to present a holistic discussion on the upcoming National Party Congress. While both scholars are well-known names to all in the audience today, those of you who wish to know more about them, please go through the speaker bios in the literature provided to you at your seats. Dr. Panda and Dr. Deepak, thank you for joining us today. We're very excited to get started and look forward to a productive and engaging dialogue that allows us insights into your minds. Poised to mark the start of an unprecedented third term for Xi Jinping as CPC, General Secretary, as well as Chairman of the CMC, the future evolution of the party leadership at the upcoming Party Congress has already been decided behind closed doors. The party leadership has been filled by Xi over the past 9 years with representatives with whom he shares personal and professional relationships. The majority of these loyalists are either Shaanxi natives or subordinates from the provinces he previously worked at as party secretary, so that's Shanghai, Fujian, and Zhejiang. As 2 members of the Standing Committee and 9 members of the Politburo are set to retire, with important changes opening up, important vacancies opening up in the economic, diplomatic, as well as military sectors, the 20th NPC is set to shape the ideation and implementation of China's economic, security, and foreign policy, as well as domestic governance for the next 5, if not 10 years. Holders of key state positions, such as Yang Jiechi and Wang Yi, are also beyond their retirement age, which sets the stage for major changes in the foreign ministry. The logic behind these personnel changes is determined by several factors like age, loyalty, political signaling or biaotai, expertise, ideology, and more. We at ORCA have for the past few months delved deeply into some of these factors and other trends which will definitively affect China's top leadership at the Party Congress. In our special report prepared by our research associate Rahul Reddy, titled The Prince and All His Men, we decode the potential personnel changes that are set to be unveiled at the Congress. Another publication relevant to today's discussions is called Implications of the 20th Party Congress, Economics, Politics and Foreign Policy Changes, which is a summary assessment of changes that can be expected in the future. Furthermore, before the Congress begins on October 16th, among other publications, we will also be publishing documents focusing on the Party Congress and implications for China. These accompanied by pieces by our other RAs such as Ahana and Omkar on the faction system, assessing Xi's travel logs, Vedaiha, return of technocrats in the CPC, as well as women in China's elite politics, provide a comprehensive account of the upcoming Party Congress. Feedback and advice is most welcome from all of you. You have been presented booklets with QR codes that will take you to our website. Should you have the time, please go through our publications. Now, before we begin the dialogue, I would like to request everybody to please put their phones on silent and refrain from moving in and out of the room. Thank you for your attendance. Dr. Panda and Dr. Deepak, over to you.
Thank you. I think Dr. Panda, you may kick it off.
Thank you. Let me at the outset compliment Irisika and ORCA for this excellent panel here. And I think in Delhi, we need more voices on China like this. I'll start complimenting the excellent report you have published recently. It's educative, refreshing, documentable. I think Rahul is, I can see Rahul here, but again, okay, Rahul is here. I'll come to your report, excellent report, and I think everyone in this room, particularly in Delhi circuit, should start with that report. This is pointed, objective, and clear. And I think this report gives us a guidance for the 20th Party Congress. But I'm here more as a listener to Professor Deepak, to be very frank, who has been an outstanding scholar in terms of following the China's domestic politics. I have high regards for him as a sinologist. Also, wonderful to see here the wider China circuit from Delhi. I have my senior colleagues, colleagues with whom I have worked here for over the years, immensely benefited by their knowledge, their critique, their scholarships. So whatever I'll be sharing with you today, partly credits goes to you. Let's start the debate in terms of a kind of plain analysis. Where do we stand today, as far as India is concerned, and as far as observing China from sitting in India is concerned? The first pointed direct questions to Professor Deepak. How do you read the 20th Party Congress next week, and what's your plain thinking in terms of the outcome of the Party Congress, in terms of the future of the party, future of the leadership, and future of China itself? I'll leave it to you.
Thank you, Dr. Panda. I think at the outset, I also would like to thank the young team of ORCA. They're doing a brilliant job. In fact, I've also gone through the work they have produced. They keep on sharing with me. Excellent. Keep it up. And also thanks to all the non-faces in the audience, and also the new ones. I'm happy to interact with them maybe after this session, and through emails and other social media as well. Well, as far as my reading of the 20th Party Congress is concerned, the outcome, especially when you are thinking about those, since our task has been cut out already by Rishika, flagging out four main points: 20th Party Congress, then the economy or the domestic situation in China, the foreign policy, and finally a little bit about how it will impact India. To use 16 Chinese characters as far as the outcome is concerned, I would say it would be Renmin Xiu, so that is people's leader, the first. Renmin Jingji, people's economy, second. 大国外交, great power diplomacy. And finally, as far as India is concerned, I think it is going to be the same, 小韩印度, which I say China will continue to belittle India. Now, as far as the first thing is concerned, I think as it has been the case with other party congresses, it would say it takes stock of the last 5 years and then draw a blueprint for the next 5 years, that is the 21st Party Congress. And I think, in China it will be 举什么旗帜, so 什么路线, which banner to hold and which general party line to follow. It is going to be Xi Jinping's banner and his line of, you can say, Xi Jinping's thought for socialism with Chinese characteristics, which may be again shortened to just Xi Jinping's thought. It has been speculated, and perhaps the ongoing 7th plenum, which has started on 9th and would finish on 12th, primarily the four things. I mean, this is the convention. One is to draft the report of the party general secretary, which Xi Jinping will present during the 20th party. The second, the CCDI report, which Wang Tuning has made some remarks to, and the party charter, some of the changes perhaps declaring or anointing Xi Jinping as the party chairman, and also incorporating his part in the charter, in the charter form. It's already there. Socialism with Chinese characteristics, but in order to bring it in a par with Mao, perhaps it could be done. And then the Presidium, so we should take on to the proceedings of the 20th Party Congress, designating the names. Last time there were some 40 plus names, and this time perhaps in a similar amount, mostly reflecting who are going to be in charge of the Central Committee and then the Politburo and Politburo Standing Committee. These would be mostly reflected in Presidium. But of course, I think the elderly, they would also be there. And as far as the execution of so this Panda and general policy is concerned, Xi Jinping naturally is going to appoint his own people, Xi Jiajun. So he would be incorporating his own people, and mostly from the places where he has served. For example, Fujian, he has stayed there for 17 years. Then in Zhejiang for less than 5 years, and Shanghai less than 1 year, and the party school for 5 years, and Shanganning, this region. So where his dad, Xi Jinping, so he worked for long years, and perhaps a few people from here. As far as the economy is concerned, this is not my formulation. This I have borrowed from this Wen Jun, which is one of the foremost agricultural economists in China. At par with Liu, I would say. So he has formulated it recently, and we can gauge why he has coined people's economy. Well, at the outset, I think we really need to compliment China as far as the figures are concerned, because they look very good. Then Xi Jinping took the mantle of the party back in 2012. China's economy was roughly 8.2, 8.3 trillion US dollars, but now after a decade, it is around 18 trillion according to the Chinese statistics. And per capita income of the Chinese, it has also doubled from $6,000 in 2012 to $12,000 roughly. But the widening social inequalities, so they are there, and according to that, 0.14 of the Chinese population elites, they account for almost 33% of the total GDP of China, so which is huge. Therefore, what has been noted down in 19th Party Congress, the unbalanced and inadequate development and the people's need for a better life, it is going to remain the main contradiction as far as the 20th Party Congress is concerned. And of course, there are various other challenges, as you have been reading. The COVID-0 policy is there, the bad finances of the local government amounting to $4 trillion US dollars, and the real estate trouble started by Jagannath, which has debt of over $300 billion US dollars. And if you take into account other real estate companies, so it comes to around $7.7 trillion US dollars, which is huge. And I think we can talk about it a little later. But as far as foreign policy is concerned, I would say it would be still the framework of two pillars. The pillar one is building the community of shared future for mankind, which is the grand idea of Xi Jinping himself. And then second is the major power relationship, which of course takes into account its relationship with the United States, Russia, EU, and another flank of it would be the economic or other relationship of China with the VR country, developing countries. So these would be the two flanks, of one body that is building of this community of shared future for mankind. As far as India is concerned, I think it would be competition continuum, as I would call it, in various domains in order to diminish its rising influence, whether in the region or our global aspirations globally. I think this much for now, maybe initially. Perhaps we can talk it in more detail. So maybe I will also perhaps ask you one small question. Because I have seen one of your recent articles, and you have stated that Xi Jinping has consolidated its power, crushed domestic dissent, and shifting further inward towards totalitarianism. But contrary to your formulation, so China, gives its own formulation, and the formulation I find that is the Chengguo, or the whole process, democracy, so they have come with. So how will you, comment on it, or maybe how did you use your idea about inward, totalitarianism which China is moving?
Thank you very much. In fact, excellent overview, and I don't have much comments to offer. And thanks. I must say that I'm so impressed by your impeccable Chinese. Don't have much comments to offer to your comments. But what I'm going to do is that I think I'll comment on that article you are referring to. But before that, let me comment on ORCA's report. And this is what I was hinting at. And I think again, my compliments to Rahul. He has actually named it the Prince and All His May, predicting personal changes in the 20th NPC. So I think I wrote to Eriska by saying that should not it be emperor instead of prince, and I think that's what my thought process is. But what really is catching in your report is the first sentence in the report, where you write that the 20th Party Congress is about institutions as much as it is about one individual. And therefore my comment here is that, and linking it with the article you are referring to, my national interest article about totalitarians, I think there are three issues needs to be discussed. It's not about only party, it's not about only leadership, it's also about China as an institution, China as a state. And I think this is where we need to talk about the 20th Party Congress. And I think there are three comments I would like to offer here in context of the 20th Party Congress. One is that I think if we closely see the Party Congress here, the character of party is in question. And I think that is what the world is talking about, and that is what in India we should be talking about. I think if we see from the previous Party Congress, let's say, as a sinologist, you have observed it more closely than anybody here probably. I mean, from the 16th to 17th Party Congress, the legacy that had started, the institutionalization process within the party, that's completely missing on the system. So today I think there is a break of that institutionalization process, and that is a huge question mark for the party's identity and for the future. Second is, I think what is really problematic within the party today is that I think there is no methodological system, even though they had denounced a long time back that they hate this word democracy, but then they accepted that within that communist umbrella there is the democratic institutional norms they will follow. Intra-party politics, a kind of selection or election process within the party, even though the Guanxi used to be the medium of getting selected to the higher level. But I think within that umbrella, there was some sort of institutionalization and democratic mediums. That's missing. Today, what we are having a command culture procedure. The second problematic aspect that I do see, I think here my colleague Professor Ravi Prasad Narayanan will recall our discussion in IDSA, 15 years back almost. Now this is about the civil military discourse. A person comments 4 positions. He grabs 4 positions with him, And today all looks good, that there is a huge chemistry between party and military. There is no coup in China today. And that was a false news. It is easy to believe that news possibly. But then I think if we go into the details of this civil military discourse, what it really says that, obviously the PLA is under the control of Xi Jinping, primarily because he has his own man in his state, and he has actually, taken stronger actions against the top PLA charge, and that's why the PLA is obedient under him. But does that really create a situation of harmony within China? And I think that's there the party's structure is questioned. The second thing is the character of the leadership. And what here I would like to do is to compare the personality of Xi Jinping with the previous leadership, particularly with Jiang Zemin and Hu Jintao. There was serious power struggle between Jiang Zemin and Hu Jintao. In fact, those who are following the party politics, party military politics, they will recall that Jiang Zemin held the CMC chairmanship for some time, even though he gave up the power. But still, Hu Jintao accepted it. Today, there is a gap. There's no the new generation leaders are in waiting. Xi Jinping has kept all of them at bay. And I think that also a problematic trend within the Chinese Communist Party, which actually puts a question mark on the leadership. The third is, and this is where I was commenting about Laos, I think we need to talk about the character of China as a state, as an institution. The world debated hard, but the world also accepted about China one thing, that the more we engage with China, the more we invite China, and the way the train conjunction started with the open foreign policy, probably there will be a much accommodative China, even the China stay on the other side as an authoritarian party there as a communist party ruling, and here the democratic countries might not agree. But there is a combination, there is an engagement which is possible. Today, I think that engagement is missing, certainly we are seeing, and I think the pandemic has dented the process, partly also the kind of gaps Xi Jinping has created for China. And I think these three problems are severe problems as far as I look at it. And come to the economic parts a little bit. And I think I completely agree with you. I think the kind of rosy picture Xi Jinping has shown to the world and to his people, possibly he has achieved something, and that has been the success story of China. And there the Chinese have actually excelled as a model in world politics. But I think I go into the details, questioning that China dream. Of course, China dream was possibly not for the rest of the world, it was for the Chinese people. But when today Xi Jinping claims that he has successfully eradicated poverty in China, that's really not acceptable. And I think here, I'm just, I recall my piece in IDSA, I think 4 or 5 years back during the 19th Party Congress that I wrote. I think this definition of poverty has to be critically analyzed. If you see how do the Chinese define poverty, they define the poverty that any person's income, like poverty income is something like 1.9 US dollar per day, which is around 130 RMB or something. I mean, that's not much to be very frank. And it's unbelievable if when Xi Jinping is saying that in 130 rupees, a person can live in Shanghai and Beijing. It's almost impossible. But I think what is more problematic here is that if we compare the Chinese perspective for poverty eradication with the UN perspective and definition of poverty eradication, UN says that if we're putting a bar about poverty, that's like $2 per day. So that the difference is 0.10% or $0.10, and that's a huge amount when we talk about a populist society like China. Now the more problematic is, it's not first the definition of poverty. It's more about what really constitutes the poverty and how do we eradicate the poverty. The income, the facility, and the resources, and the rehabilitation process not to have that poverty further. And I think even though one can agree that by saying that the Chinese have successfully established a lot of infrastructure in the poor areas, and those who have traveled to the rural China, they will completely agree with the model they present. But then we know for a fact that those poor Chinese, when they move to the big cities in China, in Beijing and Shanghai, they would find it difficult to survive.
Yeah, so I think you're right. As far as this institutionalization, institutions are there. They are in question now. And Xi Jinping is systematically maybe eroding them or destroying them. You must have seen these new regulations, the revised regulations which were brought out recently. Essentially, you can say revision, especially as far as the clause 4, 5, and 6 of these 2015 regulations are concerned. It deals with the term limit and the age limit. So that means essentially this Qishan Huaxia, 7 of 8 principle have been totally demolished. So it is whims and fancies of Xi Jinping, whom to bring in and whom to kick out. So therefore, his clique, as of revealed from Fujian, from Zhejiang, from Shanghai, the new Shanghai clique, because there's already one, Shanghai clique, and then from the party school, so these people would be promoted. And I think mostly Fujian clique, it would be heavily incorporated into the Central Committee, especially the Politburo, 25 members. As of now, he has 12. So this may go up to say 60 to 70%, which is a little. Right now, it is a little less than 50%. He has 12 only, so we expect people like if you are interested in the names, or I think it may waste some of our times, like Wang Xiaohong would be there, Cai Qi would be there, He Lifang is there, Wang Kunming would be there, and Zhuang Rongwen, Miao Hua, and He Weidong. So 2 of the people who are likely to be incorporated in as vice chairman of the military commission. Miao Hua is already there, but he's likely to be promoted, most likely. And then from Zhejiang clique, this Li Qiang, Tan Min'er, Lou Yangshan, Zhao Yide, Chen Yixin, Tang Yijun, so on and so forth. These people are also there. But mostly, I think it would be in the Central Committee. And some, for example, from New Shanghai clique, with Ding Shuixiang, he is the person to be watched, or perhaps would be groomed as a successor or even successor of Xi Jinping. That's how I think. And then from party school, people like Li Shulei and Shi Taifeng, so they would also be incorporated. And Shanxi, this Ningxia and Gansu, so there are also Li Xi, this Guangdong provincial secretary, so he is also there. Mostly, I think it would be dominated by Fujian clique. As far as the coups are concerned, I think this is very interesting. I think there have been coups. In fact, Oxilai affair and Zhou Yongkang, it is one of the coups that you talk about. And this is evident because you say Guo Guoxiong and Xu Caihou, so these were the people of Jiang Zemin. And there were essentially, one Jiang Fan, Jiang Zemin's office in the Central Military Commission, which was, you can say, supervising activities of Hu Jintao, and Hu Jintao was not having, freedom to act on its own. So now these factions, especially Jiang and some faction, including perhaps Hu Jintao himself, they are repenting that had this office still been there, perhaps Xi Jinping would not have been able to, do the kind of things he's doing at this point in time. So you are right, when you are saying that that is a sort of like a contradiction when Xi Jinping talks about poverty eradication, absolute poverty according to him, and also the main task of the 90th Party Congress, it was, China into a moderately prosperous society, which China believes, 小康社会, which China believes that they have already done it. So they are moving into the next stage, which is in 2 steps. All of us know, from 2020 to 35, and from 35 to 2049, when China would be a great innovator, at the world stage and perhaps taking the leadership. But the problem, one, as far as the poverty definition is concerned, is problematic, and secondly, it has been countered by Li Keqiang himself, that there are more than 600 Chinese people, so they have.
In fact, this is what interesting. I was reading one of your comments, and therefore I would take your conversation to ask you a little further upon that. How do you see, what are the possibilities that in terms of factional politics? Do you still think that after the 20th National Congress of the party, do you still think that there is a dissentiment against Xi Jinping still might continue? And who are these people who might lead and who might really pose him a challenge? And the second question is that who is the next leader in waiting? Is he really going to announce, or they are going to announce in the party, or how long gap they can keep it before announcing? If you could come.
I think I will answer your last question first. I don't think he is going to announce any successor, so that is the practice. I've hinted that maybe Ding Fexiang, so he is probably perhaps wrong, but you don't know. Once you announce your successor, then in Chinese history we have seen that China has faced a lot of trouble, whether it was with India or and others. So I don't think so. But I think so. This factionalism has to be seen in two contexts. One is the political context, and another is the economic context, and that's why we see the Chinese discourse on saying and talking in terms of political coups and financial coups. So I think they are related terms. As far as political coups are concerned, so these are very much, I would say, engineered, by Jiang and Zhang faction, as it is generally believed, and it is because of Jiang Zemin and Zhang's people across all the apparatus, whether it is military. We have cited the example of Guo Boxiong and Xu Caihou. They were, in fact, Jiang's people, keeping an eye on everything. And whether it is public security, or even now the, you can say, political and legal enforcement agencies. In fact, Xi Jinping, to start with, he straight away took control of the army, which is very important. And it is on this basis he believes that the color of China's rivers and mountains, it cannot be changed. And he categorically said, 不允许任何人改变江山变色. So that's what he says. And I think it is from this perspective, he believes the princelings, right, the prince, they have the flesh and blood relationship with the people, not, the people like Zhu Rongqi, not the people like Wen Jiabao, not the people, other those who don't have this blood relationship. So this is, in fact, one warning to his detractors that this so-called tiger and flies campaign, it is going to continue, even after he is anointed for the 3rd time. And as far as this legal, political and legal enforcement, this was the last, I think, domain where Xi Jinping has not entered, and he discovered that some of the people here, they were, having allegiance to these people, that may be detractors. And we see the case of Sun Lijun, we see the case of Zhu Ronghua, we see the case of, Wang Like and their associate. In fact, they were part and parcel. It is, believed that they were planning to assassinate Xi Jinping. Whether, it is true or not, but Xi Jinping, he feels perhaps that way. And second, which is most important component, that is the financial coup. I think here, because most of them know, financial nerve of China, it is at the hands of Jiang and Zhang faction. So which is extremely important. That's why we see Xi Jinping establishing another stock exchange in Beijing, because stock exchange of Shanghai, Shenzhen, even Hong Kong, so they have been controlled by his detractors. And you want, believe that the princelings, for example, Jiang Zemin's grandson, so Jiang Zhicheng, so Boyu Capital is run by him. And Zhou Yunlai, who is the former CEO of CICC Alpha, is the son of Premier Tu Rongqi. If you see Ping An Insurance, so it is run by Wen Jiabao's family. And the chairman of the CITIC Capital, one of the economic giant in China, it is run by the former, son of former Politburo Standing Committee Liu Yishan. So this is what Xi Jinping fears the most, so that the financial nerve of the country, it is with its detractors. And Hong Kong crackdown, to some extent, one of the reasons it is also this control by these people. So I think it is in this context, I think, though the kind of factionalism we have witnessed, say during 17th Party Congress, 18th Party Congress, even 19th Party Congress, I think this kind of factionalism we will perhaps not see is wanting to diminish, all sort of factional politics within the party. I think I'll also ask you one more question as far as economy is concerned. You have also mentioned in one of your recent articles that China is fast losing its carefully built competitive advantage. How did you deduce this, and are you just indicating to China's, you can say, comprehensive national strength built during the reform period, and how it has been eroded in the new era headed by Xi Jinping? Perhaps you are referring to new era ever since Xi Jinping took the reins of party in China.
My statement was more political than economic. I'm not an economist, so how do I see this China losing the competitive advantage? I think for that we have to look more from an outreach point of view, how the Chinese are actually positioning themselves and how previously they have positioned themselves and where they are actually losing out or lost out already. I think as far as economy is concerned, that has been the success story of the party, and the party over the years has capitalized on that, and therefore we know for a fact that probably despite of the pandemic, despite of the crisis, we are not giving the intended results, the Chinese economy has done well. The leadership is banking on that, and probably it will continue to survive. And the world also partly dependent on the Chinese economy. So therefore, this China losing the competitive advantage should not be read in economic terms. But what I mean essentially is that I think it has to be understood in China's political control culture. How the economy is being controlled and where China is actually losing out internationally. One is that if you see the recent case of Xiao Zhenhua, the Chinese-Canadian businessman who has been jailed for 14 years. I think his company was fined for $8 billion fee to pay. And I think that's a huge amount. And if you see the track record of that gentleman, he was a successful business person who was drawing the bridge between the West and the Chinese businessmen. And that was not really going well with the party. Similarly, if we take the example of Jack Ma, in fact, one of the interesting, I was reading one article where I came across a statement from Jack Ma, where he said that, among the richest men in China, few have good endings. So I think the corporate sectors are already feeling suffocated. The trend which was started during Hu Jintao's period, that China opening up economically, China going overseas, and having that trend of engaging with the foreign companies and asking them to go for a future joint venture, that's not a mistake. And I think the Chinese are losing out the competitive advantage of having overseas partner. The second thing I think which needs to be also talked about, the role of the state-owned enterprises. I think there was a time, and in fact in my first book I covered, that if we go into the history of the state-owned enterprises, they played a significant role. In fact, the whole process of the BRI was introduced, and it's one thing to say that BRI was introduced in 2013, but if we go to the Chinese economic and political history, BRI was actually introduced 10 years back during the initial years of Hu Jintao. He introduced few policy measures. So what essentially we talked about that Xi Jinping introduced, actually it was already introduced during Hu Jintao. The overseas going, having overseas ports, establishing the stationing point, the ports, constructing new maritime ports in terms of trade exchanges. So these are actually old story of the Chinese. Now there, the state-owned enterprises, they were given a task to perform and bring back the results. And I think under Xi Jinping, they are feeling suffocated. Even within the BRI scheme, they were empowered to some ways, given a mandate to perform. None of them are really giving them impressive results. And what state-owned enterprises in China are asking is a foreign collaboration. And I think that is becoming difficult for Xi Jinping to offer them a clean sheet to go ahead and enter into a joint venture. Even though we have so much examples on the BRI to say that the Chinese businessman and the foreign businessman are cooperating on project basis, but whether it is on an equal basis, whether if there is transparency, whether there is norms which are of international standard, those are subjective, and therefore the Chinese state-owned enterprises are unable to give the internet results, and they're struggling to bag a rightful place in the international environment. The last point in connection to that China losing out the competitive advantage is that I think it is one thing to see BRI that this is the flagship initiative of Xi Jinping, and possibly after the 20th Party Congress, BRI will continue. And they would like to bring new initiatives, new schemes to revitalize the whole BRI process. But I think I would say that BRI has both success and failures. In India and many other countries, we have this tendency of downplaying the BRI, which is absolutely right from national security point of view, from national sovereignty point of view. BRI is not acceptable to us. But then we cannot simply dismiss BRI just on the face value. BRI had success in Central Asia. Today, Chinese have displaced the Japanese. Today, Chinese have displaced the Russians. And right after the Ukraine war, they are going to do it more. In Southeast Asia, even though the Japanese are the strongest, economic bearer there, investor there, the Chinese are gradually taking that place. So it is all through the BRI, and we can see the same thing happening in the South Asian countries. So, but on the contrary, where I do see that the Chinese are actually losing out the competitive advantage is that lack of transparency, lack of meeting the international norms. Even though in the new BRI schemes, they have introduced more environmental friendly schemes. Let's say they are trying to be so transparent, but we know for a fact that BRI is a national project, is linked with the China's development plan. So therefore, I would say that internationally, if you see, I think after the Ukraine war, the way the Chinese have supported the Russians, they are also losing out advantages in Europe. We can discuss that later on. So it's more of a political statement to suggest that the Chinese are losing out the competitive advantages they created themselves for over the last 20 to 30 years. But I'll come back to you.
Yeah, but I think economically too it can be proved, because you see the kind of economic slump China has witnessed of late. In fact, World Bank has said that they are not been able to reach the target of 5.5, which the Chinese government has set. For this financial year, they would be registering a growth rate of only 2.5%, perhaps perhaps. And most of the projections by their economics like the info, that if China is able to register a growth rate of, moderate growth rate of, say 4.5% between 2020 to 2035, they will be able to register per capita income of over $30,000 by 2035. And for that, you require to double the present GDP, which is around $18 trillion, which seems a little difficult task. Secondly, I think the world has also come to witness that China was, free riding, right? So it had the term as the revisionist power. That means, the kind of commitment it had to the liberal international order when they started reforms. So they have, retracted from that commitment. So that is one thing. And another, perhaps it is also important, maybe we will be discussing that under this foreign policy, the ideological confrontation which is taking shape at this point in time. So that has also perhaps, eroded China's competitive advantage, if you believe the few research, which have been published recently in the Gulf country. So the rating, disapproval is as high as 83%. So this is one of the indications, and then I think largely, especially this year, last 3 years, they have to be blamed for themselves because of these rigid COVID restrictions. As a result, this is their own statistical bureau giving the numbers that almost 466,000 state-owned enterprises and 1.5 million small and medium enterprises in China, they have gone plastic. So it is massive. So you can imagine the kind of economic loss. So they are suffering, and if the COVID-0 continues, which I think it is going to continue for some time, China's economy will further slow down. And as far as this rivalry is concerned, I would like to give you just a small example of this chip war with the West, primarily the United States, right? Which I think we cannot ignore because chips, they are going to the fuel of the fourth industrial revolution, and China has already made it public, through their mega programs, whether it's Made in China 2025 or the big fund that they created in 2014 for developing chips. And you want to imagine that at present there are 142,900 chip-related companies registered in China. And of course, many are going bust also, but new are being added. For example, in 2022, over 30,800 new companies, so they were registered with huge, massive capital. If you see the kind of capital that they have generated, from 2014, the first phase till 2018, and from 2019 to 2021, it is over $50 million. And that is a little less, maybe perhaps all the same which US has committed for the new Chip Act of theirs, right? And if you still see the ratio, even from 4 to 4, the kind of money they have invested, so it is much larger. Yeah.
So, thank you. I think quickly we should discuss a little bit more about the foreign policy issues. So I would invite your comments. How do you see, what are the implications this party congress might lead for China's foreign policy approach and in terms of outreach and other conflicting issues?
I think as far as foreign policy is concerned, so I think the framework which I talked about, up front, it is going to remain the same, and the focus is going to be to build, community with shared future. So that is one thing, and BRI is part and parcel of that. So it is going to continue, even though the kind of investment they have committed in the initial years is not going to be there. The way they committed, invested 24 billion in Pakistan, almost $13 billion in Bangladesh. I think this kind of mega project, is gone, because China itself, I would say the kind of laissez-faire, the era of laissez-faire they enjoyed, so that's over. So they won't be able to afford, so they are cash strapped. I don't think they will be able to. But I think as far as their big power diplomacy or the major power diplomacy is concerned, so that would be the focus. And I think it would continue to be on the lines of what Yang Jiechi, told Jack Sullivan and Secretary of the State, that that U.S. doesn't have the qualification to talk from the point of strength, right? So I think this is going to continue, and they are going to be more assertive, because we see the kind of status quo they have been changing on the ground, right? They have changed it initially to start with the South China Sea, then in the India-China border, and now Taiwan Strait, the medium line, so it is gone. So I think they are going to be assertive. This assertiveness is going to be there. But of course, I think the competition continuum, the way we talk about it in the context of India and China, China would continue to do it also with the United States, because they would not be averse to, cooperating wherever they could cooperate with the United States. And also they won't, try to take the conflict to perhaps, another level where they cannot afford to do that. And Taiwan, of course, is going to be one of the flashpoints, but I don't think it will be the place where the war would be fought. I think if there is any confrontation, it is going to be South China Sea, not Taiwan Strait. And as far as EU is concerned, China would, continue to maybe create some of the fissures in EU, and we have seen the reports that Scholz is visiting China in the first week of November. He perhaps could be the first dignitary, and of course, I think that is also in the wake of this Ukraine-Russia conflict that Germany has faced. I think you are more appropriate to comment on that. So I think maybe I will ask you briefly comment on, because the party Congress, they prominently figure Taiwan question yet and again, and this time perhaps it won't be any different. Unification through military force, they have been talking about all the time. So do you believe China will use force at least before the 100th anniversary of the PLA, which is likely to be 2027?
So on two specific questions, let me comment. One is on the Taiwan issue, and second is on the China boundary dispute. On the Taiwan question, I think from the 17th Party Congress onwards, there was this dual debate whether it's going to be peaceful unification or it's going to be forceful unification. Now I think we are coming to a conclusion. Probably the forceful unification is the most plausible one, the way turning out to be. I think there are two specific issues we need to keep it in mind. What is the target? How early this forceful occupation is going to happen? Second is that what's the strategy that the Chinese would be implementing? I think, as you rightly pointed out, 2035, 2049 goal, that of course factored Taiwan. But today, I think from 19th Party Congress onwards, and in the last work report we saw there was explicit mention about Taiwan. So this Party Congress report also definitely will carry more explicitly about Taiwan. The point here is that how quickly they are going to have this military invasion. It is one thing to forecast, probably to say that after Nancy Pelosi's visit, the kind of military exhibition we saw, probably the Chinese will be in a readiness to do something over the next few years. Yes, they will be doing it. But I would disagree with those notions which suggest that there will be a military occupation completely. I don't think it is going to be a complete overall military occupation. It is going to be an incremental military occupation. And what do I mean by incremental military occupation? I think they will be targeting, as you rightly pointed out, the South China Sea first. And we are seeing already a trend happening in the South China Sea. The militarization of the South China Sea island is there. And I think the first target would be the Taiping Island. They occupy there, and then they move to the two other islands which are critical to Taiwan. That is the Kinmen Island and the Pontic Island.
Yeah.
And I think these are the three islands they will be aiming for. Once they occupy those, and therefore I do say that it's going to be not a full occupation, it's going to be an incremental military occupation of targeting the Taiwan first. And then probably we would be seeing how the world is reacting, how the Indo-Pacific countries are reacting, and of course the most strongest power in the regions, the United States of America is reacting, and the Quad powers are reacting. And today, I think there is also a vacuum which has been created, and that serves the Chinese strategy more, is that Japan has lost Shinzo Abe. And I think that's one of the most important factors, because I don't really see Kishida acting in the same manner. And if we see Kishida's, Prime Minister Kishida's, foreign policy strategy, even though he looks more engaging towards Taiwan, whether he is going to follow that model of, having a more security-oriented tie-ups with Taiwan, that's yet to be seen. Because after all, Japan would like to also economically keep its door open as far as China is concerned. Coming back quickly, so therefore my take on the Taiwan would be that it is going to be an incremental military, and whether that's going to be 4 to 5 years period or 10 years period, we will see. But definitely it's not going to be a 20 to 30 years period. So the Chinese have really, preponed their target dates as far as Taiwan is concerned. Quickly on the China-India boundary dispute, and I think this is where I've been trying to study the patterns, and a few days back we were discussing in Singapore with some of the finest minds on the China-India relation. I think what Garber has said, and I would buy that point, is that he has said that the biggest invention India might face, the next Chinese invention India might face on the maritime domain. And I think I would go there, even though we are seeing all of this incident happening on the western border and in the middle sector, we saw not so much in the eastern sector. But I think these patterns only suggest that the Chinese are here just to disturb the trades, just to disturb the status quo. They are derailing the negotiation process. So the Chinese strategy is to keep India busy in terms of dealing with China. But I don't really see that the Chinese are here to occupy something as far as India is concerned, even though there is a debate in Delhi which is continuing after PM's statement that the Chinese have not really occupied any territory. That's for another day, another debate. But I think the broader PL implications as far as China's 20th Party Congress and India is concerned, I think we will see the continuous periodical in Chinese, China creating problems on the boundary issues. But I think India would be probably facing more testing on the maritime domains from the neighbors. And I think that is the most severe problems for India in next few years to come. But I think probably on the specific boundary issues, we might see something happening on the eastern sector, because for the last 10 years, we don't really see the Chinese giving that open statement on Taiwan and Arunachal Pradesh, the way they have actually given a statement in the first decade of the 21st century. And that's for a precise reason, because they are waiting for His Holiness Dalai Lama to optimize, and they would try to apply that logic that the sixth Dalai Lama was brought here. So I think it's a calculus Chinese strategy which has been implemented in India, and the 20th Party Congress will just take it forward to the next level. But I'll stop here and probably we'll have some comments and questions to discuss and answer.
I think we still have 4 or 5 minutes. We have been asked to conclude by 7:45. So maybe one last comment on India-China, the border issue. There is no doubt that China has Chinese status quo on the ground. There is no denying the fact. Whether you take it in the petroleum point 40, whether you take in the petroleum point 15, or various other petroleum points, right, from 10 to 30 in the depth zone, right? So it's a huge area, almost 900 square kilometers. It has been denied to us, where we used to patrol. And if you take into account Jagannath, so this area, this is also huge, almost 1,000 square kilometers. So essentially, I think 1,900 square kilometer of area has been denied to India for patrolling, so which is very, very serious. And second thing is, and China may replicate the same thing, like creating buffer zones in various other friction points, and may create more friction points. And second thing is, the kind of so-called poverty alleviation villages they are building along the border areas. To start with Doklam, fortify their positions, and also in Longchu, which according to our understanding is to the south of Macmillan line. And though it has been pronounced as a legacy issue, but still it is there within the perceived boundary south of Macmillan. And this perhaps is an answer to Wen Jiabao's 2005 visit, and the draft version we signed. Then we objected to the Chinese proposal of handing over Dalang to them, saying that there is no question of uprooting the settled population. So China perhaps is settling their population through these poverty alleviation villages. So not only across India-China, not only along the India-China line of actual control, but also in Bhutan. So you mentioned that they are not been asking, but I think they are playing a bigger game. If you see the conflict with Bhutan, apart from these two northern areas and western areas, which they wished for swap, they have created another in the east, just below Dalang, southern this environmental sanctuary, right? So I think it is there India need to be very, very watchful of. And third point is the kind of infrastructure they are building, their side of border. If I may point to the expenditure during the 13th five-year plan and 14th five-year plan, from 2016 to 2021, altogether, put together, so it is more than 43 billion US dollars so they have spent in Tibet alone. The kind of roads they have built, I remember our Minister of Defense in 2008-2009, Mr. Anthony, making a statement in the parliament that China has built 56,000 square kilometers of roads inside Tibet, but the same today has reached around 120,000 kilometers. So I think this is a concern, so which India need to be keep in mind.
So thank you. I think we might take some questions. I think we'll have some 10 minutes or so for questions.
I have two questions. Dr. Panda, Dr. Deepak, thank you for that overview. Well, you already commented on the India-China boundary issue, but I'll ask this anyway. It's interesting to know that the number of PLA WTC delegates is nearly double that of all the other 4 theatre commands. Now, what does that signal to you? You talked about the standoff, but is there anything else we should read into this, perhaps a broader perspective for the region? My second question is, how do you see Xi's no limits partnership with President Putin going forward? Do you think he could perhaps be persuaded, if the war does not go Russia's way, for any compromise in return on US backing down on Taiwan? Thank you.
Maybe the second question Dr. Panda can take. The first I will take very briefly. As far as restructuring of the theatre commands by Xi Jinping back in 2016 is concerned, so I think it was again keeping in view, one is of course the modernization, informatization of the PLA, and then the second and equally important is also to cleanse the PLA, bring in reshuffling and take out all the other factions from, and he has rightly done so. But as far as the Western Theatre Command is concerned, there are reports that the 3 of their generals have been removed. There may be some problems. They may not be listening to the commands. I don't think so, because I think there are genuine problems. The last one, he had cancer, and second one, he died at the age of 58. So the first one was transferred to other theatre command. But as far as China's intention at the border is concerned, it is primarily going to be, you can say, breaking India here and there, but not going for any larger military conflict. So that is for sure.
No, I think I would agree with you. Just on one point, I would like to add on the first question. I think this is what I was talking to General Mandip Singh in previously. I think PLA lacks war experiences. So when you are deploying large amount of troops, you also give them adequate exposure, adequate experience to deal with the local condition, to get familiarized with the local condition. And I think that's also a practice game for them. But I'll comment on the no limit partnership. I think this is an interesting question because many analysts have taken it on the face value by saying that this partnership between Putin and Xi Jinping is here, just building up, and it's of a really vital interest. Yes, I think there was this partnership building up, and there's no doubt about that. And I think the Chinese and the Russians are coaching up for a long time. But I think we need to see it more critically. This partnership has also severe limitations, and the limitations is more about the stature, about their positioning in Central Asia, and about the market occupation. You see, for the Chinese, the most important thing is to completely outpace the Russians, dislodge the Russians in the Central Asia, and emerge as the most strongest economic power in Central Asia, so that neither the Americans, nor the Japanese, nor any other powers ever can occupy that. The second thing, I think the Chinese are also today revisiting their game plan with Putin as the war continues. And we have to understand it in the local context. As my director is here, Dr. Nicholas Swanson, we are discussing since last 2-3 days about the same issue with our Indian colleagues here in different think tanks. I think Russia has become a more classical permanent enemy in Europe. There is a lot of hatredness about Russia, and that has actually impacted the Chinese in a huge manner. The Chinese are also being disliked in the greater European context today because of the Russians. And one example I would like to cite, look at the Chinese game plan in the Eastern Europe and in the Central Europe. There was 17-1+ strategy they introduced. But today that's fizzled out to 13+1 or 14+1. So they are constantly losing out when it comes to the goodwill, the BRI strategy, the economic campaigning they built for themselves, they are losing out. So the Chinese would be definitely revisiting their no-limit partnership with Russia at some point. They're just buying time because this is the testing time, this is the testing condition, and they would like to look at the Taiwan issue, the South China Sea issue, taking advantage from the Russian game plan, and they are also drawing serious lessons from the war in Ukraine. It's just one thing to say that probably this is being conducive to the PLA. That's actually not the case. PLA has actually become defense, and that's why my original argument was that it is going to be incremental militarism. PLA is drawing serious lessons, operational capabilities they are learning, how to sustain a war, how to mobilize the troops, and how to deal with multiple threats at the same time. Ukraine war is not really Ukraine's war. Today Europe is backing up, America is backing up. So the Chinese are drawing lessons from tomorrow if they are occupying Taiwan, they have to they will be facing multiple challenges from Quad countries, Indo-Pacific countries, Japan coming together. So I think they are drawing lessons. So they would be not only revisiting the no-limit partnership, but they are also drawing serious lessons from the Russians' mistake on Taiwan. Thank you.
All right, so we take one question at a time, and if you could just introduce yourself with a short bio, please keep your questions short. All right, Dr. Panda.
Thank you so much, Professor Deepak and Dr. Panda. I have just a very quick question. Professor Deepak, you mentioned about catching tigers and flies, and you mentioned Champion's Yuan Liang and Sun Li Chun. How do we deduce that these are actually tigers and flies and not the Panda flies of Xi Jinping's time? That's there. Second is that what's the possibility that Li Keqiang would be in the Politburo Standing Committee, given the fact that there are divergences between how Xi Jinping and Li Keqiang see the whole Chan Yun bird in the cage sort of debate? Thank you.
Now, I think as far as first question is concerned, these of course, so they are identified with that affiliation, right, which is very important as far as this factionalism is concerned. And Sun Lichun and Fu Zhenghua and Wang Like and four of their other associates, so they at lesser position, so they have been associated with Sun Zhongcai and you can say other camp, the Doyukang and Poshibai camp. So that is there, and according to their position, where are they? For example, Fu Zhenghua, so he had been the justice minister, the minister level, and if you take note of these people, almost so more than you can say 1,500 such people have been removed, so which is very, very high. It has never happened in China. And if you talk about these flies, they are in millions, right? Maybe around 5 million people if you put together. So it's massive. So as far as the second question, I'm sorry, I lost the track. What was that?
In short, what's the possibility of Li Keqiang?
Oh, Li Keqiang, yeah. Li Keqiang, I think, at maximum, as I have predicted, maybe he could be brought to lead the NPC. So that is one possibility. And second, which is also likely, he could also retire. That in fact he has himself said that he wishes to retire. That is another thing.
Right. So, please.
Thank you very much for giving us this fantastic overview of China. So my question pertains to the maritime domain, which Dr. Panda did mention about the BRI and the Indian Ocean. But we all know that in the last 2 years throughout the standoff, notwithstanding the kind of pressure that was put on the Indian Army along the LAC, the PLA Navy stayed well clear of the Indian Navy in the Indian Ocean. There was not even one provocative incident that took place. And that is very clearly because China understands its limitations in the Indian Ocean as of today. The situation could well be different 1 decade from now, considering the way the Chinese Navy is expanding. But coming to what do they intend to do in the maritime domain, Dr. Panda, perhaps you mentioned that South China Sea will be their first objective. He has to dominate it. They already, sort of dominated. But when push comes to shove, and the trade of all those countries in that belt starts getting affected, the Indo-Pacific, 60% of our global GDP, 60% of global population, I'm not sure that it will be such a cakewalk for China, because the intention of dominating the South China Sea is to shape the order there, the international order there. It's not so much about military and of course the resources, etc., but The moment all these other countries in that belt, but including European countries who now have Indo-Pacific strategies, start feeling threatened, or the trade starts feeling threatened, I don't think they will allow China to really dominate the way China would like to. Secondly, just dominating South China Sea does not suffice for China's overall global ambitions. South China Sea does not give them a favorable maritime geography. They need ocean space. That ocean space only the Indian Ocean provides it. It also provides them access to the Atlantic, which is very important for them for 2049. So ultimately, as I see, the great game, so-called great power game, is going to be played out in the Indian Ocean, not so much in the South China Sea or the Pacific part of it, because the Malacca dilemma is very alive for them so long as they stay east of the Malacca Straits. That is where I would like to ask you, sir, where do you think the Indian Navy should position itself when this great game is being played out? It's not going to be a China-India struggle. It's going to be we are going to be part of the entire equation. And what do we need to do to ensure that in the Indian Ocean we maintain a favorable maritime situation and we are able to shape the outcomes and don't allow ourselves to get shaped by the outcomes that this big power game when it is played out in the Indian Ocean?
So, yeah.
Sorry.
Very brief, I think we are running out of time. So I think first is that not all European countries are threatened by China's maritime presence. It's only still a handful of. That's why most of the European countries, they don't really have an Indo-Pacific strategy, they don't really have a maritime strategy per se. But I think the way the Finns have unfolded their Indo-Pacific strategy, now we see Germany and Netherlands talking about Indo-Pacific strategy and factoring maritime issues, the trend will only expand within the European countries, among the European countries. I think the concern here, the concern from the Chinese are that how they are building their capabilities in terms of new ports, new stationing points, in critical sea line of communication zones. And I think that is one target what the Chinese are continuously building. In fact, if we see the party Congress report and also the work report that they released in March, every time there is a mention about blue economy, about maritime capability, building of your strength, capabilities in those regions. So that indicates that they are here for a long game, not for a short game. So I don't think outrightly we are going to face any confrontation from the Chinese on the maritime domain. But I think two issues which will be critical from India's point of view. One is how the Chinese are handling the South China Sea dispute in future. Even though we are not a party there in the dispute of the South China Sea, but given our energy interest, given our joint oil exploration with the Vietnamese companies, even though we have reduced, not stopped completely, that is going to be a challenge. The second is more on the going to the Eastern African side, and I think there the Chinese are going deeper time to time, and there I think their calculus with Pakistan and the CPEC is going to give them a more advantage in times to come. And I think there we need to build up our strength in terms of having a good backup plan with the West Asian countries, Middle Eastern countries, and also the Eastern African countries, the coastal East Coast African countries. Thank you.
I think that's a one-liner. I think our relationship with major powers, especially the United States, and also the middle powers in the Pacific, that would be very crucial for the thing which you have asked.
All right. Mr. Sahu, followed by Dr. Rao. If you could both just keep your questions short.
Sir, I am Akash Sahu. I am research analyst at IBSA with the Center for Southeast Asia. So my question is regarding the Philippines, and it has been some time that the US and the Philippines have been developing 5 bases in the country where the troops could be stationed, and Australia also has a similar agreement with the Philippines. India and Japan have improved their relationship with the Philippines. How could we expect would be Beijing's policy towards Philippines, especially now that there is a new president? And if you could comment very shortly about IPEF.
Akash, thank you.
given,
Yes, thank you.
I think while on the Philippines, India should be thinking of the entire ASEAN, and that's what exactly I think our diplomacy and other instruments of state policies are focused on. I think one is what kind of security architecture we are able to build with these countries, and we are moving in that direction. We are having a lot of joint exercises with many countries. But more importantly would be the economic integration with these countries. And as long as we don't integrate economically with the region, we would not be recognized as an insider by these countries. Otherwise, I mean, this applies to our engagement in all the blocks, whether it is Middle East, whether it is ASEAN, whether it is Central Asian republics, or Europe.
We have time to
Yes.
Okay. First on the Philippines, I think we have to see in the context of the regional politics surrounding on Philippines. One is that the Chinese are catching up very fast vis-a-vis the Japanese. The Japanese are the still most dominant investor as well as the partners with the ASEAN countries, but the Chinese are catching up. And I think what the Chinese are doing currently, on the one hand, you are seeing that militarization of the South China Sea islands. On the other hand, there is a trade and robust economic engagement happening under the BRI projects with the ASEAN countries. So Philippines is very much in the Chinese calculus as far as the party congress is concerned. We only see it is going forward. But I think the Chinese are also severely changing a huge challenge from on Philippines, because this is where the Japanese are focusing. And if you see the two previous leaders, Prime Minister Suga and Prime Minister Kishida, after they got elected, they went to Southeast Asian countries as their first visit. I think they went to Indonesia and Vietnam. And Philippines also was followed by their subsequent visits. So therefore, there is an intense competition between China and Japan going on as far as Philippines is concerned. But India should be only partnering with the like-minded countries, and I think with Japan we are having a lot of concurrent policy initiatives in the regions. But then our initiative so far has been more bilateral-centric with those countries. Quickly on the IPEF, I mean, again, we can keep on discussing on IPEF. I think IPEF is just an accommodation and it's a creation of a compromise deal from RCEP and CPTPP. There are several areas in IPEF. I don't think there has been proper discussion among the neighbor countries. It's just more of a political statement so far. So India has joined it. But when it comes to the negotiation, we have to wait and see whether India would be agreeing to all the negotiating deals. Because on the RCEP, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, even though India was a founding member, and India did continue to negotiate on the RCEP deal, but at the last moment India did withdraw it. So I think it is too early to comment on the IPEF, and I think we have to also wait and see how the Biden administration is taking forward with IPEF, with Japan and other partnering countries including India. So a lot will depend on the specific areas of the negotiation deal as far as the future of IPEF is concerned.
Thank you, Rishka. Thank you, sir, both of you. I'll be very, very brief. I know we are running short of time. My question is very direct. So, in my understanding, also China is extremely wary of the sanctions. Okay, and that is one of the reasons why the Russia-China no-limit relationship has been showing limits. The brief question to you is that. Can you tell me if China has ever tried to circumvent secondary sanctions ever since 2014? I mean, if there's anything mentioned, and what are the conversations within China on that? Very briefly. Thank you.
I think no, according to the available sources, and this has been verified by the American themselves, that they have not.
Briefly, my comment. I think I don't think the Chinese are really worried about that. Most of the international banks are having branches in China, so the sanctions might not really be that effective. If it is going to be effective, secondary sanctions are going to follow. It will be a huge loss to the world economy, and the Chinese knows for that. So that's why the Chinese are not really worried about it.
Thank you. Sir, please your question.
So I'm very happy to learn that you said that China is going to be cash strapped. And therefore, I see, is there going to be a problem about pushing through CPEC?
I'm not saying that they don't have cash at all. I mean, after all, the $18 trillion economy, most of them banks, they are state-owned banks, they are not Lehman Brothers, right? So that's why I don't think so they will have the kind of hard landing as far as these debts or mortgage debts are concerned. So I don't think so. But yes, problems are there, and I think it is also understandable because China cannot register a growth the way they did it, during the deep globalization, right? I think we also did, but then they did much better than us. And this could be compared the kind of GDP growth Hu Jintao's period or the decade, from 2002 to 2012. In GDP terms, it was just $1.25 trillion economy when Hu Jintao took over. But when he left an economy of $8.5 trillion. So naturally, the economy, if you see, the gradual, you can say, forward movement of the Chinese economy, so it has been slowing down gradually. But of course, I think at this point in time, global environment, global slump, Chinese own problems, domestic problems, I think it has been the way they have been handling their economy at this point in time. But if they go back to perhaps deepening of the reforms as far as investment is concerned, because Europe is interested, German in these pandemic years, they have invested $10 billion, Japan has invested $3 billion, Taiwan invested $3 billion. So China attracted, a lot of investment, especially this year, $146 billion of investment, much larger than any other country. So if their policies are in place, so I think there will be, even through internal circulation, which Xi Jinping has been talking about, dual circulation, they will be able to register a decent growth rate of, say, 3 to 4%. I think we should be enough for them to catapult them as, global power by 2049.
May I also just ask, how do you place India between the Russians and the Chinese post whenever Ukraine is over?
I think for India, it is becoming extremely difficult to sustain our position, and that is why when the Russian in the United Nations General Assembly, they wanted to have a secret ballot. India opposed it. So I think it is going to be difficult, and in long period, I think India would love to decouple from Russia.
All right, thank you. I don't think we have time. You can interact with the speakers afterwards. I'll just give the stage to Rahul for some closing remarks, and then we move for tea and coffee.
Am I audible? Good evening, everyone. It's almost good night, but good evening. I'm Rahul Karna, a research associate at ORCA. It's an honor and privilege to be presenting the closing remarks at ORCA's first Expert Scholars Dialogue event. First, I want to thank Dr. Panda and Dr. Deepak for an eye-opening discussion. It really is a privilege to hear them speak, and I personally learned plenty from today's discussion. I also want to thank members of the audience for taking the time today to attend this event and making it a success. I'm confident that you've all gained some valuable insights on the party congress, thanks to our experts on stage. And finally, I want to thank members of Team ORCA, Ishika, Omkar, Ahana, and Atish in their efforts organizing the conference and making it a reality. The party conference is barely a week from now, and it's an exciting time to be working on party politics. For some of us who made predictions on what to expect, it's a bit of excitement and anxiety, but overall it's an exciting time to be studying China. Both Dr. Panda and Dr. Deepak have detailed the landscape of elite politics in China and Chinese foreign policy, making it possible to properly understand the party congress and its implications. I now have the daunting task of summarizing their views presented today, which I've been delivered in plain I'll do so very briefly to the best of my abilities. Dr. Panda has detailed several political and foreign policy problems that afflict China's outreach to the outside world. There is one I'd like to highlight. China's competitive advantage that you mentioned in terms of private companies and state-owned enterprises is slowly losing its cutting edge, and this could be a massive challenge going forward. This trend also converges with an attempt to reduce reliance on external trade and exports at a time when the domestic economy isn't in great shape as well. And I think this erosion of China's international image, especially when it's looking to project itself as a preferred development partner, is not conducive to foreign policy objectives. Also on the question of Taiwan, Dr. Panda detailed the first targets and other military objectives that Beijing might have. His assessment that this will be a calibrated strategy to isolate Taiwan without isolating China on the international stage is, I think, very well balanced and well informed. Dr. Deepak detailed several domestic dynamics that are influencing the party congress and the party in general. And as far as personal changes are concerned, Dr. Deepak has identified Fujian as a province from which there will be more central committee members, and this is something to watch out for. Dr. Deepak also detailed how the dent to institutionalization is worrying, and this could emerge as a major challenge at party congresses going forward. One idea that I found very compelling is the idea that she believes princelings are more legitimate heirs of China than other factions. And I think this presents a challenge to the idea that performance informs legitimacy, which is a formula that has been successful so far. But a reversion of this appears to be taking place, and this is worrying for insiders and outsiders as well. There are several takeaways from today's discussion and several pointers for the future. One that I can think of is the possibility of a study of party financing and how party members have ties to the financial world. And I think detailing this would sort of illuminate, would bring another angle of analysis to party politics. And another area of study that I can think of is the study of state-owned enterprises and other companies that are directly involved in China's overseas development projects. Obviously, Huawei is just the tip of the iceberg. With that, I think I'll conclude, and I'll invite the audience to reach out to the speakers directly if you have any questions. Please do take the opportunity to network with Dr. Deepak and Dr. Panda after the event if you'd like. Thanks again, Dr. Panda, Dr. Deepak. It was an honor. Thank you for coming.